In the slow cancellation of the future, Mark Fisher talks about this stagnation many of us are experiencing and noticing within culture. Everything is recycling the same aesthetics, the same music, the same lifestyles. We are all coquette clean girls with bleached assholes to do Pilates and drink matchas. And the worst part of it is, all of these things feel like they're recycled from yesteryear. On more than one occasion, you have likely said yourself or heard someone saying, oh, nothing feels new anymore. Everything is a sequel or a remake from another decade, and so much along those lines. And that's partly because the internet has created an ever present now where trends from a past are constantly recycled. Our sense of forward movement within culture becomes harder and harder to pinpoint, which makes us feel suffocated by the sense of stagnation. When I listened to V by Doja Cat for the first time, and I gotta say, I'm on my eighth or ninth listen. I freaking love it. And I debated doing a song by song review or song by song breakdown, but I feel like this conversation needs to get started first because when I listened to it, I heard the 80s inspiration and immediately thought of Mark Fisher. And even before listening to the album, we knew it was going to be 80s inspired. She talked about it in this interview with Apple Music. It was all over her visuals, which I'm living for because the 70s and 80s are my favorite visual eras. So I am taking it all in. But in the interview with Apple Music, she was talking about motivations behind this album. Around 14 minutes in, she said, the synth was introduced then. It's so fall and so real and warm. You can feel like you were there when you hear it because every sound is upfront. 22 minutes while describing what this album is or the energy it carries, she says, it's truly, for lack of a better word, fun. And I think that's what people need right now is to remember that life can be fun and it's not always so serious all the time. Which brings me to The Slow Cancellation of the Future by Mark Fisher. He talks about how music nowadays feels like a rehashing of old sounds. He uses the example of how even if many of us weren't alive in the 70s or in the 80s, in this case with Doja, we still know distinctly what the 70s sounded like. We still can recognize what the 80s sound like. So even if I didn't watch any promo for this album, I would listen to it and immediately place it in the context of the 80s, immediately know that it's an inspiration. I immediately know that its inspiration was derived from the 80s. But if you think of the music from the 2000s or the 2010s or the 2020s, can we say definitively that there are distinct identities each of those era carries? And if there are they distinct from one another or does it all just blend together? Fisher theorizes why we are seeing this slowdown in culture, and part of it, as he says, is because our internet access has both reduced boredom while increasing our anxieties around our relations on and our relations to the web. And on top of that, the goods we need to live have been hyper commodified or made so expensive that we don't have the time nor the space we need to create room for the inspiration we need to forge paths forward. Around 20 minutes, he says, paradoxically, in some ways, big record companies insulated some musicians from market pressures. The record company gave them advances. The fact that recorded music was a commodity that could actually yield remuneration, this gave musicians some autonomy that they increasingly lack in the current moment. Part of the problem is cultural production has been effectively decommodified or has become a commodity effectively priced at zero, whereas the things that cultural producers rely on has been hyper commodified. They still need gas, electricity, and housing. If the future seems like an impossibility, both because of this ever presence we are experiencing on the internet and also due to the kneecapping of the middle and working class, what do people have to hold on to if not the past? One of my favorite fashion theorists, Rian Phin, made a video about how our obsession with 2008 millennial hopecore is because people are trying to look to and redo what worked in the past in hopes of creating a better future. I'll put it here.
This obsession with like 2008 millennial hopecore is because people are trying to redo and reapply what worked in the past in order to create a better future rather than relying on nostalgia because they're afraid of the present. And that's why I like the work of Lizzie Klein, a photographer. I think that Lizzie Klein's work grounds fantasies, exalts the quotidian, and reminds us of the early 2000s kind of like futurist aspirations, this idea of like hope and tranquility and peace, aspiration, harmony, wellness, resolution more than anything.
I recommend you go and seek out that video. It's going to be in the caption. I love it as an exploration of exactly what we are hoping to hold on to by looking toward the past. And I think that's exactly what Doja Cat was getting at when she was talking about music from the 80s in those idealistic terms, right? The synth and how real and warm everything sounded, and her call for all of us to return to fun in these extremely heavy times. We are bogged down by a lot right now. The future, as Mark Fisher was getting at, doesn't seem like ours anymore. So we're wrapped up in this constant cycle of revisiting the past, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Toward the end of his talk, Mark Fisher says the problem with nostalgia in a culpable sense would be that it makes us overrate the past. But I think the problem we've got is overrating the present in lots of ways and underrating our own dissatisfaction with it. The final note is where I have to disagree with Fisher. Going back to the Ryan Phin video, I think a lot of our generation is very aware of our dissatisfaction with the present and whatever projected futures are being imposed on us by ruling elites. This moment we are experiencing now, where nothing feels new and we are rehashing recipes from 20, 30, 40 years ago, is showing us that we are looking for ways to get out of this ever presence, this liminality, to leave these back rooms and forge a future that is actually innovative, a future that values art, that values love, that values humanity. Because despite the hell that was Reaganomics and the war on drugs, despite the vilification of queer communities through the AIDS crisis, despite it all, the artists, the dreamers, the rebels with many causes were still able to make a way. And maybe they knew something we haven't figured out yet. So we are reaching back to figure out how to make our way forward. And what else have we got left if not the duty to fight for our future, even if that means revisiting the past over and over and over again until we forge a way to move forward. My name is Anna. I make videos about music and culture. If you've loved this, if you've enjoyed it even a little bit, like and subscribe for more. I have loved having you, and I'll see you next week. Everyone wants to drive fast when I'm recording.